Gichinga, Mentero Economics. We have Horondoho, former public debt DG at Treasury, and we also have Irene Ubani, who is a journalist from Nigeria. But to kickstart this particular segment, Kenya has received a new loan facility, and this particular facility actually is going to be quite a hefty amount. That is 262.7 billion shillings from the International Monetary Fund. What does this mean for the country? The loan facility is expected to stabilize and begin reducing the country's debt levels. The new loan raises Kenya's total debt to 967. Of course, we understand that our national debt actually stands at 7 trillion shillings. So maybe bringing in Ken in this particular issue. Seeing the IMF, the discussion is IMF is back. And we, juxtapose the previous IMF we saw in the 90s and the current IMF. Is the trajectory the same thing?
Well, it's very similar. If you think of IMF in the 90s, when they came to Kenya, it was all about fiscal consolidation. It was all about privatizing, and there's an expectation that we'll see a bit more of that, a bit more fiscal consolidation and privatizing maybe firms that have not been doing very well. So it's an uncomfortable time for the country, but I think it's also a time to think out of the box, to be innovative, and to really think of how businesses can start, how we can stimulate business environment to be able to start generating taxes so Kenya can start being self-reliant again.
Definitely. And bringing Mr. Ndoho in, there's the issue of debt refinancing, because we already have an outstanding debt, but we need to pay back. So seeing us take other facilities, how will it affect our debt refinancing capabilities?
That's part of the challenge of this problem, because, with all our budgeting and planning, one of the things we should always provide for is something we call exigencies, things that happen that have no contingencies, that happen that you have no control for. So, basically money for a rainy day. Now, with COVID-19, just about the entire world has been affected by this. So while we say that the IMF are back in Kenya, I think they're back globally. And so the issues around debt have been a challenge all across the board. So there have been a couple of facilities that have been created by the World Bank and IMF to both give us, part of them is what they call the credit facility for helping us to basically tide us over the medium term while we reorganize our books. And so this is just the beginning, I think, of a longer journey. And I think because it's global, and if you look at it, the entire world is currently in a very bad place. So I expect that what we'll see now is a lot more of this sort of facility being accessed. And even this money, while it's, of course, it's targeted at debt, it's also targeted at just as a budget support. The reality is we don't have enough cash. And from the looks of things, I don't think we are going to be back in surplus for a long time.
Definitely. Actually, the global debt, it stands at $281 trillion. Irene, we are talking about Kenya. Nigeria, the biggest economy, 200+ million people. How is the debt discussion in Nigeria, if I may pick your mind?
All right, thank you very much for having me. Of course, we understand that the pandemic did, in fact, once again really reflects the economic situation, the very porous economic situation, of countries that already had bedeviling financial challenges. And for you to see how deep it went, you could also see that even first world countries were also impacted, not to talk of the African economies. Now, what did this mean? A lot of help was needed. And this challenge that we faced in 2020 was not a challenge for just one country. It was a global situation. And of course, we saw a lot of African countries seeking help from the IMF, of which Nigeria also sought help and in fact did get help of about $3.5 billion, from the IMF. Currently, we have our debt service of 3.32 trillion naira, which is a whole lot, and I believe that moving forward by 2021, expected growth rate, should sort of help out in terms of debt servicing. And I like that the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement has also kicked off, so we should expect a lot of intra-African trade, in this regard. And one thing that I really hope to see in terms of helping with our debt servicing is being a more production dominant country, as against just one which relies on international aid, because that is one of the only ways Africa, Nigeria particularly, can get out of its debt situation. If you keep waiting for aid from international organizations, if you keep waiting for aid from external countries, if you cannot make finished products as against commodities, then would continue to sink well into this particular situation of death. And take note, Nigeria is one which has a lot of natural resources. So sometimes when I try to juxtapose, the resources that we have as against our debt servicing, it doesn't totally, make a lot of sense to me. So a lot of changes needs to be made in order to get ourselves out of this debt situation.
Definitely. And that is an overall discussion when we look at the continent of Africa. So much resource that could be extracted and put us at a better position. In Kenya, as we stand, maybe, Ken, in terms of a holistic approach when it comes to dealing with the debt situation, we've seen we're borrowing more to seal the loopholes, the budget deficit and whatnot. Do you think there is a holistic approach? In fact, the point that Irene is raising about boosting production on the ground to make sure that economies are strong within.
I completely agree with Irene. We do need to boost production. We do need to boost businesses. We do need to stimulate the business environment. Only then can we be able to generate the revenue we need for the country. I think if you look at all the tax blocks that really make doing business in Kenya and around Africa difficult, we need to remove them and allow businesses to do what they do best, which is enterprise. So the new conversation has to be about enterprise, and we need to start pushing those taxes towards other sectors like the property market, which really has been benefiting from speculation. But we really need to really look at businesses, helping them thrive, helping them employ more people. Only then can we be able to thrive as a country.
Definitely. Mr. Ohoro, the discussion, the big discussion actually, has been no country has no debt. So borrowing is part of life. Yeah, in fact, looking at the statistics of the global debts that we have, the $281 trillion. Looking at the nature of our debts, we've seen sort of a turn of trajectory by Treasury, focusing on concessional loans, more of that and less of commercial loans. Do you think, what impact do we expect this turn and this new focus to have on our debt discussion?
Well, I think it was critical. I mean, there was no going back. We had to get into concessional loans. I know also there'll be a lot of renegotiating or looking to renegotiate as many of our commercial loans as possible. There's no way that trajectory of going on commercial loans was going to be sustainable. Let me just, on a point that both your guests have raised, that, just to give an idea about the sort of what I call a challenge that Africa has is this. They're doing some sums. If you take Netherlands, Denmark, and Sweden, have a population of 33 million people. They have a GDP, a combined GDP of $1.8 trillion. Africa has a population of Sub-Saharan Africa has a population of about 1.3 billion people. Our combined GDP is 1.6 trillion. That's the gap, the productivity gap we're talking about. And that for all our policies, if you don't move away from spending on salaries and moving into production, into manufacturing, Africa has a problem. And Africa is actually in danger because remember that we also have a global overcapacity in China. So it's not enough even for Kenya or for Africa to get productive. it must find out becoming even more efficient than even China, so that we are back in a place where we can now get onto the treadmill, to the new space of growing a real economy. Until we do that, to really this issue of debt just go around in circles, we must find a way of breaking our past and moving into investing, as Gichinga says, investing directly in our enterprises. Really, that's the future.
Definitely, that is a very important point. In fact, to pick the mind of Irene from Nigeria, has there been an intentional effort to see that this investment in our local enterprises is becoming more proactive? Is there any policy-wise and also, on the ground kind of situation?
Oh, yes, of course. I must say that the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission is actually doing a whole lot in terms of, showcasing our natural resources and even human capital, potential in the country to ensure that we get enough investments from external parties. However, we understand that the pandemic also impacted, really impacted on the level of financial foreign direct investments that came into the country as at last year, right? So although we're expecting that in 2021, this should increase, so we see that we have, the newsletters which showcases different states in the country, the different resources that we have, the different potentials, possibilities that foreign investors can sort of tap into to come in and invest in the country. Because of course we have a whole lot going on here in the country, although we do have issues around insecurity, which is also trying to be tackled by the federal government. But I would really commend the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission on its efforts to sort of sell the positives that the country has.
Very important. Now, we want to move on to the good news across the world. The newly appointed World Trade Organization Director General, the First Lady, the first African, former Nigerian Finance Director, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. And she said that she wants to see, she doesn't want actually to see business as usual, as she will need to broker international trade talks in the face of the US-China conflict, respond to pressure to trade reforms that is happening across the world. But bringing in Ken, expectations in terms of her entry, what do you expect to be top on her priority list?
Well, I think we have to manage our expectations very well. Obviously, she's a career economist with a great track record. I think one of the challenges would be on the US-China relationship. That has been a thorny issue that really has to be addressed. Then there's also the other issue of reviving the WTO ministerial conferences. Those ones stalled a bit, and it's time those get revived and we start having trade discussions around the world. I think if she can sort of achieve some success in those two areas, I think it would be a very good start for her.
Definitely. Mr. Ndoho, do you have any expectations of her entry?
Yes, I think I'd get a lot more patriotic. I'd say I think she should measure her success by how well Africa does during her tenure. I remember we had great expectations when Barack Obama became president of America. I'm not so sure Africa benefited much from that. So in my book, I think if she can protect the African free trade area, find ways of making sure we leverage it for our benefit, finding ways of removing at least tariff and non-tariff barriers from our exports, find ways of getting Africa into the manufacturing space, or at least opening doors for us to move up our value chain as a continent. I think she should have a very narrow focus as far as her measure of success. If she is there for, 5 years, and then all we have is the same old story every year, where Africa is forever knocking on the door and never getting in, then I don't know if I've celebrated her time there.
Okay. Irene, you are Nigerian. She is Nigerian. She served in Nigeria. From her track record, especially being the finance minister in Nigeria. What are your expectations of her now?
Okay, I mean, I followed up with the entire process, and one of the things that I would expect is, in terms of transparency, it should be, top notch. At least she was able to do that, and we saw the result while she served as the finance minister here in Nigeria. She was able to even wipe off, debt of $30 billion right here in Nigeria. So that's one. Two, the future of trade, as we may all agree, must be, hinged on technology. She did mention that the WTO trade rules would have to be adjusted to also incorporate in it e-commerce and digital technology, right? And these are the things that I would really expect, because if we want to maintain relevance, if the WTO wants to maintain relevance, these are the things that we are looking out for. And prior to now, we've always, the WTO we had the issue of inequality between developing countries and developed countries. So I expect that her taking on this position now will sort of serve as the bridge between the developing nations and the developed nations, such that everybody now becomes sort of competitive, on the global stage.
Definitely very important. And this discussion about Africa being left out when it comes to discussing matters global trade has been quite an issue. Looking in the 1970s, our participation in the global trade was actually high. It was playing close to 4.4%, which is also relative to the world. It is a little bit low, but you find that number went down to close to 2% right now. So she has a lot to do in her entry, and we're going to break down some of those concerns that we think should be addressed, but that will be done subsequently. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. That is BizChat Weekly. Ken Gichinga, CEO Mentoria. We have Wahor Ndoho, former public debt DG. And we have Irene Ubani, journalist from Nigeria. Thank you very much. All right, at that particular note, we want to take a short break right here on Business Today.